Thank you for staying with us. We turn now to a major anti-corruption development that has sparked nationwide attention. A federal high court has ordered the interim forfeiture of 57 properties allegedly linked to former Attorney General of the Federation, Abubakar Malami, pending the outcome of investigations by the EFCC. The properties reportedly spread across several states and valued in excess of 200 billion naira are suspected to be proceeds of unlawful activities. Let's listen to this report before I introduce my guest.
The Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC, is once again putting the spotlight on alleged proceeds of corruption, this time linked to a former Attorney General of the Federation. Following an ex parte application by the Anti-Graft Agency, the Federal High Court had ordered the interim forfeiture of dozens of high-value properties spread across several states. Justice Emeka Waite of the Federal High Court Abuja has ordered the interim forfeiture of 57 properties allegedly linked to the former Attorney General of the Federation, Abubakar Malami, and 2 of his sons. The properties said to be proceeds of unlawful activities are to be temporarily forfeited to the federal government pending the outcome of investigations. Valued at over 213 billion naira, the landed assets are located in Abuja, Kebbi, Kano, and Kaduna states, underscoring the massive scale of alleged holdings. This development adds to the growing list of large-scale forfeiture orders secured by the EFCC in recent years. In a separate case, the Anti-Graft Agency obtained a forfeiture order involving 753 duplexes and apartments in Lokogoma district of Abuja linked to the former Central Bank Governor, Godwin Emefiele. The Federal High Court also ordered the final forfeiture of 830 million naira, $4.7 million, and several other properties traced to the former Apex Bank chief. Another high-profile case is that of former Minister of Petroleum Resources, Desiani Alison Madueke, whose assets have also been seized over corruption allegations. Among the properties linked to her are a $37.5 million luxury property on Banana Island, Lagos, a 15-story building with 18 flats and 6 penthouses. Investigators also traced 34 billion naira in cash alongside 9 billion naira allegedly laundered through bank officials to the former minister. Other seized assets include a block of service apartments on Awolowo Road, Ikoyi, properties in Yaba, Lagos, an apartment complex in Bayelsa State, and a mini estate in Mabuchi, Abuja, comprising 13 terrace houses. The EFCC says the forfeiture are part of its ongoing effort to recover public funds and deter corruption at the highest level of government. While many of these cases are still before the court, the Commission insists the message is clear. No matter how powerful, alleged process of corruption will be traced, seized, and recovered. Celestina Iria, TVC News, Abuja.
All right, so that's a comprehensive report of the allegations levied against former Attorney General of the Federation, Abubakar Malami, and other high-profile individuals. But let's remind ourselves that for 8 years, Abubakar Malami was effectively Nigeria's most powerful government official. If you leave out late President Muhammadu Buhari and former Vice President Yemi Osinbajo, who are constitutional leaders. Today, former Attorney General Malami is facing money laundering charges in a country in which he once defined money laundering and virtually every other charge. Now, one of the biggest questions I'm asking my guest tonight is, if a former Attorney General of the Federation, the nation's chief law officer, could allegedly amass questionable assets while in office, doesn't this point to institutional collapse rather than individual misconduct? So to help us answer these questions, unpack the legal, political, and anti-corruption implications of this landmark ruling, we're joined by Mr. Lanre Suraju, a renowned anti-corruption crusader and chairman of the Human and Environmental Development Agenda. Thank you very much for joining us, Mr. Suraju. Happy New Year to you. Welcome to Politics Tonight. It's good to see you again.
Thank you very much. Happy New Year to you. Thanks for having me.
Right. So let me begin by asking, how significant is this court order in Nigeria's fight against corruption?
It is highly significant. I mean, this is part of a thing, and thanks for the prologue with what you said. I mean, this is more of an institutional thing. And unfortunately, this is what we actually also need to do as citizens. So it is not just going to be the politician who would be expected to transform things in Nigeria and change them for better. It has to be the citizens, and that would be the media, and that would be the civil society. Purely sadly so. I mean, Malami was part of the recovery process of the Alison Madueke assets in the US that you mentioned, and also in Nigeria under the anti-corruption effort of the EFCC. He was also part of, the process of many of those other remarkable cases that happened under with the EFCC under former chairman Ibrahim Magu. But one of the things that was actually also instructive at that time was it was actually clear that Malami was not part of the process of, fighting corruption or recovery asset at that time. He didn't come from that background. And the simple thing, as much as you have the institution, is also important about the personality. When you look at people who have the unfortunate situation of coming from, and this is, I think it's just about the upbringing and also the orientation, because it's not just only about poverty, but when you have people from deprived background that you can see, and many of them, once they get to office, they forget about, anything that is called consequences or even any form of moral dignity for them to uphold while in office. It is the situation where they see other people before them, their predecessors falling. They see Malami actually, like I said, never believed in even the fight to recover about the $5.6 billion worth of asset, the OPL 245 Malibu, oil license, was not part of what Malami believed in, as much as it became an international thing. So there's the institutional challenge. There's also the personality. And then also is also the citizen, like I said. So the media, because many of these allegations were not just when Malami left office, which is how it was ridiculous that you're seeing the opposition parties claiming that this is political persecution. Many of these assets, illicit assets of Malami, were in public domain as far back 2020. I think the first petition on this was written by my organization back in 2020 to EFCC and ICPC.
I mean, you've talked about personality and also you've talked about institutional challenge, which I hope is something that we have enough time to discuss before we end this conversation tonight. Because, I mean, I'm particularly curious to know so much because the former AGF, I remember, supervised many anti-corruption processes. And if he himself is now under scrutiny, who was watching the watchdog? And I also remember that in 2021, this was a man who told Nigerians that the federal government had succeeded in identifying and detaining high-profile individuals responsible for funding terrorist activities in the country, and it was ready to give up names. I personally really looked forward to those names. But today, that same person has been accused, is on Twitter denying links to persons described as terror agents or financiers. So the big question is, if the nation's chief law officer could allegedly beat the system, isn't that proof that the system is designed to be beaten, Mr. Suraju?
Yeah, I mean, that is part of the thing that if you look at the Constitution of Nigeria, for instance, beyond the office of the president and the vice president in the cabinet, the Federal Executive Council, as we call it, which is the Federation cabinet of the federal government, one of the most potent and powerful offices is that of the Attorney General. It's the one that is also recognized in the Constitution. But unfortunately, the background of the people who occupy that office matters a lot. Ask yourself before, and especially for those who knows Malami. Malami had no record of any achievement, remarkable achievement, or any commendable, or remarkable case. Handled as a lawyer, as a private lawyer before becoming the Attorney General. As a matter of fact. Malami does not have any claim laid to any success. It's success, not even an apartment. I'm not talking about a property, an apartment owned in Abuja as the Attorney General. And when you look at the whole exercise, including, there were recent revelations. So you've seen the properties that were just forfeited temporarily by the court. The recent another allegation was about a $1 billion that was also owned, kept in an account, which was in a cloned account for MPA and was reported to the office of the Attorney General. It was meant to be recovered to the country, and suddenly there was just this turnaround that Malami was accused of diverting. So it's about both the institution, and that was why it was possible for Malami to actually appoint who was the chairman of the Code of Conduct Bureau because he was under the Office of the Attorney General. With that, he was confident that he has his back covered in terms of, the beating of the Code of Conduct for Public Officers, the declaration of assets as retained, so that he was able to decimate eventually the EFCC with the ignominious removal of the acting chairman, Mr. Ibrahim Magu, even to the embarrassment of Nigeria, because Malami wanted the control of this institution. And that is why you could see what you can actually call a mental form of insanity with the whole primitive accumulation of some of these assets. What are you going to do with asset worth about 200 billion? With 57 properties coming from that poor background, before becoming the Attorney General of the Federation. And it is important that we are able to join the process, even where we have the National Assembly or the Senate, screening and approving people with questionable characters. It is important that we continue as civil society and media to actually continue conducting this independent assessment and background check of people that are actually appointed into offices. Unfortunately, we were not able to do that. If we're not able to also, because it's difficult to build institutions, it doesn't happen, just in a day, just like you would say with the maxim that Rome was never built in a day. So as we progress towards achieving that purpose, we all must serve as the overall scrutiny and also screening body over and above what the DSS and the Senate will do. Right. And that's why we've seen people cleared, even with questionable and criminal background, after the security check with DSS and also the Senate screening.
And like you rightly pointed out, he has started defending himself. He says this is witch hunt, and for a fact, this has prompted some arguments by Nigerians who say, yes, we've seen few cases, and we may have, some reasons to believe that Nigeria's anti-corruption war is selective and politically motivated. Sometimes you hear Nigerians accuse the EFCC of going on a wild goose chase. Also, at different times, we've faulted slowness in resolving corruption cases in court. But would you, as a stakeholder, fault the professionalism and perhaps thoroughness of the EFCC? And in clear terms, Mr. Suraju, does the EFCC have a case against Abubakar Malami? And why should Nigerians believe this case against him is different?
Thank you very much. And it is very pathetic and painful for me. And it is so also sad that people's perception, not even perception, because there's no doubt that people are aware that public officers, majority of public officers in Nigeria are actually not only just corrupt, but they are insanely corrupt. So now, if Malami had not moved to ADC, which he knew, the investigation with Malami has been as far back as just 2023. Like I said, the petition against him leading to some of these investigations were actually written in 2020. If he had remained in APC, there wouldn't have been any claim of, selective action, political persecution, because nobody says that with Ngige, who was also a minister along with Malami. Nobody is saying that with Adi Sirika, who was the same time minister with Malami.
But would there have been, kindly hold on, sir, would there have been a case against him? Because I know there are some Nigerians who believe that once you join the APC or you're a member of the APC,
that's
things are forgiven.
You see, these people that I mentioned are still in APC. Is that correct? Am I wrong? The former governor of Kogi State, Yahya Bello, is a strong member of APC. Recently, was even appointed by the president to be a member of the party's committee. He was not only prosecuted, he was chased for months by EFCC. So the case of a witch hunt, if there's a witch hunt, then it only catches witches. So it means Malami is one of the witches. So either he's in APC, he's gone to ADC, provided that he's a witch, then he should be caught. So that is not an issue for us. So I've given that background to show that this is not in anything about political persecution. These are not just the people who are in the same government with them. at the same time. And I believe strongly in the effort and also the evidence that have been adduced by the EFCC. The onus is not on EFCC.
Mr. Suraju, let me put you on hold, please. We must take a break at this moment. And when we return, I'd like you to touch on whether or not there is any lesson or there are lessons for the EFCC in all of this. Please stay with us, everyone. This is Politics Tonight, everyone. Thank you very much for staying with us. Court orders interim forfeiture of 57 properties linked to former Attorney General of the Federation, Abubakar Malami. And tonight I'm speaking with Lanre Suraju, Anti-Corruption Crusader Chairman Herder. Mr. Suraju, thank you for staying with us on the program. But just for the purpose of clarity, which I believe you should have, an insider's perspective, what was, his direct or indirect role in the approval or disbursement of the 4 billion naira, which the EFCC is talking about? How did the 4 billion naira allegedly bypass the CBN's internal control and risk management systems? Do you have an idea?
Well, it is always about the compromise and also inducement within the process. I mean, there's been sufficient allegation, unfortunately, also to the extent that the late president was his signature forged by some of the people that were close to him. And with that, there were opportunities for characters like Malami in conspiracy with Godwin Emefiele, the immediate past CBN governor, to achieve the purpose of getting some of these funds released, not necessarily with the direct express approval of the president. And some of those are imagined, and they will also be coming open as we proceed.
But is there any lesson for the EFCC in this at all, especially with how the commission handled the case at the beginning, which suggested to Nigerians that the EFCC may be undermining its own credibility? I remember the commission announced that the former minister was offered an administrative bail and the conditions well spelled out. The commission also, graciously allowed him to attend to his health even when the bail conditions had not been met. Does this handling of Malami's case suggest a two-tier justice system? Because the question is, how many suspects without political influence have been granted similar concessions? Again, what message does this send to Nigerians facing prolonged detention for lesser crimes or lesser offenses?
Yeah, I think this is really actually very good, because it is important that, and I think the lesson the EFCC should also learn for that, it is that it has to also ensure that it doesn't pander to public sentiment of all these so-called political persecution. There was a valid order of the court granted to the EFCC to detain Abubakar Malami. So, and I think with some pressure and also influence, the EFCC granted him the administrative bail, whereas there's a substituting order. So I believe that it was also an error on the part of the EFCC. And no matter where the influence and the pressure should have been mounted to the commission from, Malami should have been detained from the first time that he visited the commission. So out of his generosity or whatever, that he was granted that administrative bail was completely unnecessary. And that was why he was able to breach that bail. So it actually got the fingers burnt by assuming that the influence that granted him the administrative blame will granted some measure of immunity, that he would also not meet the condition attached to the administrative blame, because it was a breach of that condition attached to the administrative blame of him reporting daily to the commission that then informed his detention while he refused to report for like a week after he was granted the bail. With the prosecution, I think one of the things that is very critical, and for Nigerians, not just the EFCC, is the fact that you heard the judge when he actually reprimanded, the lawyers and said nobody should try to reach me, and he is not reachable. I want it to also sound, and the EFCC should not in any way be in any way, I would want to say, shy away from even prosecuting lawyers, because one of the lawyers to Malami has a record of actually trying to tamper with the process of prosecution in a case that involved Gabriel Suzwan, the former governor of Benue State. The lawyer, one of the witnesses, reported before the court and said Suzwan tried to influence him through the lawyer, where he was invited to the office of the day, which is actually a professional misconduct. And for that reason, EFCC and DSS and the police and also ICPC should monitor this process and make sure that the judge is not subjected to unnecessary ridicule. So I wouldn't be surprised. Subsequent hearing where you would hear the lawyers to Malami asking the judge to recuse himself. This is usually the tactics for them to prolong the trial process.
I think he did that already.
Don't get just. Yeah, so I'm yet to actually read that or hear about that. So I wouldn't be surprised if that is going to come forward. It is usually the practice of some of these lawyers. And these lawyers, you can count them on your fingertips. Every of the high-profile corruption cases, this is what they do. They are not up to 10 in Nigeria. This is what they do: harass the judge, embarrass the court process, delay it, frustrate prosecution. It is not because they want to defend their client. It is just to subvert the course of justice. So EFCC must go beyond just prosecuting this case and beam the searchlight on the activities of people who are also there involved within the justice. And the judge as well should not hesitate to report, the lawyers and also all the other officers in the Temple of Justice to the National Judicial Council and also the Chief Justice of Nigeria, where cases of professional misconduct are identified. And for us in the media, we must, on the daily basis, like I said, with the screening and appointment process, with prosecution, we don't have to be listening to the third, party report. We have to be in the middle of the process. We should have dedicated people who are to do the judicial monitoring of the process so that we can also identify who actually is frustrated on the side of EFCC, also on the side of the lawyers. It is important that we're part of this process, and that is when it becomes difficult for the proceedings to be compromised.
All right, let me build my next question on the points you just raised, because, again, we cannot pretend that this is not the way Nigeria fights corruption in high places. A lot of initial drama, followed by suspects saved by what some persons called lax prosecution, judicial technicalities or pardons. Now, if this government changes tomorrow, do you expect this case to survive?
Oh, yes, I expect it to survive. That is why you found cases involving Odius or Kalu, going over several governments, even when he moved to a party where is in government. That is where you have cases involving Femi Fani-Kayode, where you have the cases. Unfortunately, the problem that is associated with them, and I think the judiciary would see this also like an opportunity to redeem his image. And thank God for the effort of the new CJN of the country, who has also taken that up and challenged people to report judges, that are compromising or that are found to have actually been wanting in the discharge of their judicial duties. It is very much likely and possible, except where you have a situation of someone like Malami, assuming the position of Attorney General again, and then trying to subvert. Malami went, and this is one of the reasons why maybe people get to forget, Malami actually attempted to interfere in a process where he had a large jurisdiction. In the case of Abebe, the brother of the former First Lady, Stella, the wife of Obasanjo, the case was prosecuted with the fiat of the Lagos state government. Because of the level of compromise of Malami, as the Attorney General then, he attempted to enter a nollie prosecute in that case. And it took the man who was just being appointed recently as the Director of Public Prosecution, the SAN, Rotimi Oyedepo. It took the young man at that time to stand up to the Attorney General and said, you lack the power to do it. Yes, you have the power of nollie prosecute, but that is in a federal case. Federal offense that is prosecuted with the fiat of the federal attorney general, not with the state attorney general. That resulted in one of the reasons why the guy was also lumped together with Magu and the rest of them when the kangaroo panel of former retired Justice Malami Salami was created to perpetuate the persecution of Magu and those who were actually fighting corruption at that time. So in the absence of such a character, who would be so brazen like Malami as an attorney general, or the president who would also be responsible? I don't see anything compromising this case, except for the judiciary as well. Like I said, but with Justice Emeka Nwite, I don't see that happening.
All right. So before I started having this conversation with you, our judiciary correspondent, Celestina Aria, gave us a timeline of some of these high-profile cases. And from what we saw, you could see that there's a pattern from Emefiele at the Central Bank to Malami at the Ministry of Justice. Are we not seeing a disturbing pattern where Nigeria's most powerful institutions fail internally before scandals explode publicly? You know, there's a debatable conclusion, which is that the real problems are not these individuals who steal, but weak institutions that allow corruption to flourish. Why are we still struggling with corruption, and how do we tackle this?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the key reasons why we struggle with corruption is because it's also very sad to say, it's because Nigerians are not really also ready. We're not committed to it. We mouth it, but we're not really genuinely committed to fighting corruption. You and I, we know, and Nigerians know, it is not even waiting to go into the ministers. Ordinary local government officials, the moment they become councillors and chairmen of local governments, you would see an urgent, immediate transformation in their lives. You would see the same thing with governors. I mean, we're just looking at the federal level. At the state level, it is worse. These governors are demigods. The way and manner in which state resources are diverted by state governors, if we succeed in getting, and you saw what was revealed also with Yaya Bello and the amount of resources that were involved, including even paying for the tuition fee of children that are yet unborn and the ones that are in nursery school up to the university level, a means of money laundering. So we're seeing a situation where Nigerians are not really paying attention to that. So people in Kebbi, people in Kano, people in Kaduna, quite a number of them in Abuja, knew when Malami were actually acquiring these assets. They know those properties belong to Malami and his student. They know that they lack anything as a source of wealth to have generated that amount of resources to acquire those properties. And we see them around, but we just walk past them. We just laugh over it. We just make it, peer parlor discussion. But until when we're genuinely ready to resist this level of display, the open display of opulence, then we're not really ready. It is not just going to be institutions that are created. People will have to operate and manage. And as long as we're not genuinely committed to upholding the verity of those process, and at the same time, the sanctity of also those institutions, nothing is really going to change in the country.
Sadly so. But there's a new director of public prosecution in the Ministry of Justice, Rotimi Oyedepo, who replaces Abubakar Babadoko. There's been a lot of commendations, and I think I heard you doing your best to tell me about how competent he is. But just like every other newly appointee, he has pledged to strengthen public prosecutions in the country. But I'm worried, how independent can the new DPP realistically be within a ministry that answers to the Attorney General and the Executive?
Yeah, I mean, if I am going to, and I think, and I still would want to commend the young man. I had reasons to have interactions with him before now, and I've also worked with him while in the EFCC. I worked also with him briefly as the SA, the prosecution and anti-corruption to the president before this recent appointment. One of the things, like I also mentioned, was his ability to stand up to the Attorney General, even at the risk of his job and then ultimately even of his life. as young as he was then. And I still expect that. One of the things that I know that we both also shared and discussed was the fact that he has actually attained the pinnacle of his career, having become the senior advocate of Nigeria before, and now being a DPP. He's not a politician, so I don't expect him to become one overnight. So the expectation will be, if we have some of and few of guys like him occupying some of these positions, I think there's every chances that we have some different disposition to public offices and also outcome. You would agree with me. Check with some of his high-profile cases handled, and you will also know that is someone who can stand up to that level. So I expect him to not only stand up to the Attorney General, but also being able to assist the Attorney General. If the Attorney General would also want to be also assisted, it's a different thing if that is not. And so I would be expecting, if there's anything that would also come his way, either by form of pressure or anything that would not conform with his ideals and what he has practiced in the past, I would expect him to ultimately just resign from that office. But it will be important to wait to see. Unfortunately, people and Nigerians have actually taught quite a number of us not to have high expectations from people in public offices.
But this is someone you've worked with. And I'm forced to ask you, yes, and I'm also forced to ask you, you know, what impact could this appointment have on Nigeria's anti-corruption prosecutions? And for members of other civil society organizations who have not worked with him, what red flags should they watch out for? Just before we talk about whether he should resign or not.
Oh yeah, the office of the DPP is very, very crucial, and that is one of the things that I think it would be very important, and for him, particularly now with the police. So quite a number of frivolous cases and charges that the police would bring to court, not only just wasting the resources of the country, wasting the time of the lawyers, and also embarrassing the country and also the government, would probably, for me, brought to the barest minimum possible. So with that, because none of those charges should be able to go to court except with the approval of the DPP. And where it is done, the DPP also has the power, the authority to actually withdraw those charges and truncate any of those prosecutions. So I'm looking at the opportunity that not only that those frivolous, trial and cases will be brought to not totally a halt, but the barest minimum possible. This would also assist the anti-corruption agencies, and the same thing with other law enforcement, NDLA and the rest of them, to get speedy process of approval for some of the charges that they would want, for cases that they need to prosecute. So with someone who has that experience, and then someone who's been part of the process and not been the conventional civil servant, it should be easier for him, to do that. And like I said, I would expect, and for those who are also familiar with him or close to him, that there's a need to have continuous monitoring of his activities, and where things are suspected, observed, or experienced, to be out of line with what is associated with. The earlier that is called to attention or called to order, it is which is what, like I said, that Nigerians are not ready to really fight corruption. It is not to be in such a situation that you just want to, encourage and pamper because you want to get benefit from him. Because one of the things you see Nigerians doing, it is not about helping him to succeed. It is about what they are going to get from him in office. So people would have flooded him with requests, proposals, and all the rest of that. That is not the way to make people in office perform. That is not the way to make them succeed. It is by holding them to the oath of their office, and at the same time ensuring that that we monitor the activities and speak up against them when they go out of line.
All right. Mr. Suraju, I would like to take you up on the activities of the Code of Conduct Bureau and the current leadership. But before that, let me take you back to 2024, when Nigeria ranked 140th position out of 180 countries in the world on the 2024 Corruption Perceptions Index, and that was the last time we had a conversation. And we also, that report was by Transparency International. We're yet to know what 2025 holds. But just last month, the president issued a strong warning about this deepening threat of corruption in public institutions. And expectedly, we must have gone beyond mere words for strong institutions to curb corruption. How do you evaluate this administration's efforts in this regard?
Yeah, starting with the Code of Conduct Bureau. So I think the first thing is to establish that the failure of the institutional mechanism to hold some of these public officers to account, and actually also prevent the illicit accumulation and acquisition of property and asset, is the failure of the Code of Conduct Bureau. I mean, that is no brainer at all, because unfortunately the politicians are very smart. Deliberately, the Bureau is not well resourced. It has only one office and then also some other outlets to deal with 774 chairmen, 36 governors, hundreds of thousands of commissioners, special advisors, special assistants, ministers, and the rest. So it is inevitably overwhelmed. And it is now still operating a manual system, quite a number of things. That is coupled with the unfortunate also influence and the process of appointment of people who man the office, and the influence, like I said, of that of the Attorney General and the rest of that. So with a very efficient, effective, and functional Code of Conduct Bureau and decentralized Code of Conduct Tribunal, we shouldn't be having these cases. That is actually the gatekeeper. The work of EFCC and ICPC would have been reduced to the barest minimum possible if we have a functional and effective Code of Conduct Tribunal. That's very short. It has a specialized force, and it could prosecute within the shortest period possible of time before it goes to the appeal process. So if this government is serious, like you rightly said, with the warning and order of the president, it is to go straight to the Code of Conduct Bureau, sufficiently empower it, resource it, and decentralize the Code of Conduct Tribunal so that we don't just have one court waiting to administrate over all these cases that will be coming from the Code of Conduct Bureau. And that will help a lot in identifying some of the assets that are declared by the public officers. The Bureau does not even have the capacity to verify majority of them locally, not to talk of the international one. And that's why the money laundering thing is possible. You saw what was also exposed with the Minister of FCT, of properties bought in the name of wives and children in the US. You have allegations of how lands were sold to family members in Abuja. These are Code of Conduct issues that the Code of Conduct Bureau by now must have swung into action in terms of investigation. But I think the new young man who has been made the chairman is actually making some commendable efforts. And he's made efforts to reach out. Yeah, he's reached out to civil society organizations. He's been trying to also coordinate some work with the anti-corruption agencies. I mean, I for one have had meetings with him like twice on how to better position the Code of Conduct Bureau. And I hope, the only hope, is that the government will resource it sufficiently to discharge those duties.
All right, then. Evidently, the fight against corruption in Nigeria is not an easy one, but it's a necessary endeavor for the nation's future. Thank you so much for speaking with us. Mr. Lanre Suraju is anti-corruption crusader and chairman herder. Thank you so much for your time. Please have a great...
It's always my pleasure. Thank you.
Please have a great afternoon. Thank you.
You too.
Thank you very much for watching, everyone. That marks the end of today's episode of Politics Tonight. But before we go, let's tell you that the views and reactions of our resource persons are theirs and have no connection with TVC News. Meanwhile, you can watch the repeat broadcast of this episode at 12:30 a.m. Get in touch with us on our social media handles, Facebook, Instagram, and X at TVC News NG and at Olajumoke using the hashtag Politics Tonight. We're also on YouTube at youtube.com/TVC News NG. I am Olajumoke Olatunji. Good night, everyone, and have a great weekend.